Hello, welcome to Artistic Spirit. Today we have MJ Coppola, author, poet, creative warrioress, coach, and podcaster. Welcome, MJ.
Hi, Katie.
Hey, so I'd love to really get started talking about creativity sprints and this upcoming creative sprint that we're hosting for 30 days of January in the Creativeville Discord.
I am super excited for this. So the last one, so I've done several, I think several with you guys, with you and friend Sarah. The first one I did with you, I remember um, I was like, all right, we'll give it a try. Like I used to write, so maybe I'll just spend a little time going back to my poetry. And because of the accountability within the group, like I really got back into my writing for the first time in like a whole decade. It was such a great experience to be able to um, hold myself accountable and have others be there to support me and be able to support them as well. Some of the beautiful stuff that came out of that sprint. I mean, one of our friends ended up just doing a piece of art every day. A couple other people that I saw like grew how they um, how they created and what they created. My book actually came out of that sprint. My book, I would not have. Yay, David's cried too. I would have never had mm, the bravery or the courage to go back through all of my previous poetry, because a lot of that poetry was so dark in that book for me. It didn't come out that way for a lot of other people, but going through it really mixed up a lot of emotions. And but the creative sprint really gave me the momentum to be able to do that. So highly recommend.
Yeah, and I love how you talk about momentum. I've seen so many people gain momentum in creative sprints that they finish manuscripts, that they just got back to an art form, or some people use it as a form of expression, whether it's to improve art skills or to just express yourself and have an outlet if you're struggling with your mental health. Like, I think there's something for everyone in creative sprints. And I've seen people who wouldn't necessarily call themselves creatives and people who don't necessarily call themselves artists really flourish in creative sprints. And I remember the first one, and yeah, our friend Sarah Habab, who's been on the podcast before, she's a creativity coach and artist, and she started just 10 minutes a day at first with the creative sprint for 30 days, and now she's on 1000 days of art journey, which is just so incredible. And yeah, your book came out of this, Demons Cry Too, which I absolutely love. We'll get more into that in a little bit, but in terms of the creative sprint, the commitment is just to post what you did that day for 30 days, and you can start small. It could be 10 minutes. If you already have an established practice, you can just work on your craft as you normally do, and then just update the group. And again, accountability isn't a scary thing. I think a lot of times we think, oh, people are gonna hold us accountable, people are gonna judge us if we don't hit our marks, or people are gonna judge us on what our art looks like and things like that. And I just want to express that Creativeville and creative sprints are really not about other people holding you accountable. It's about showing up for yourself and holding yourself accountable and showing up for others so that you can support other people through their art and that other people can support you through your art process. And there's so much that I think a lot of people don't recognize to get out of a creative sprint that just helps so much. So thank you, MJ. You'll be leading that with me, and I can't wait. You're just so supportive and such an inspiration to, I think, anyone who is trying to explore their creativity, because I think not everyone is comfortable going to those darker places to create, which if you want to transmute that energy, you have to create from that space. You have to use that energy. You have to have self-love in those darker places. And I love that you did that. And specifically with Demons Cry Too, I'd love to hear a little bit about your process in that and kind of like working with the dark energy.
Yeah. So what I basically did is after the sprint, I decided to continue with some regular form of, and this was one of your suggestions actually, is to hold space for those creative times. And I didn't necessarily, again, one of your suggestions, not have to output every time. So for that book, I had like a 3 to 4 inch legitimately pile of papers, and they were all poetry, songs, like just like doodles, everything from when I was like a teenager up until like my mid 20s. And those are the hardest times of my life. The number of times that I had like, I would call them suicide episodes in those, that space was a lot. So there's a lot of open wounds in those poems. And for me, being able to find a safe place, to know that this time is my time and that this is the time that I get to go in and rediscover that, and like you were saying, transmute it, or translate that into something that might hit somebody like, oh, I'm not alone, or maybe they see it differently. There's a couple of poems in there that people that, you know, don't really consider themselves poetry people, or you know, that kind of thing, they were like, wow, that's beautiful. And it always blows me away how you can write something and it means something to you, but the moment you put it out there, it's no longer yours to translate to other people. Like, people could ask, but it's not, it's now like they read it and they get to interpret how it makes them feel and what, and move from there. And so that's kind of how I approached putting all of that together. I wanted it not to just be this book full of poetry. For me, I had this vision of it being like an art form on paper itself. So you don't even have to read the words. You can just go through the pages, and you know, things are indented weirdly, if you will, and there's like words in the middle of a page. And I wanted the book itself to express a flow that I might not have felt during that period of time. I really think that if you're an avid journaler or something like that, like I used to journal a lot, but now I'm like every day uh, very strict about it. Now going back and seeing some of my stuff from like 5 years ago, I can go through that and start to make poetry with that, you know, go back and kind of translate how I felt 5 years ago into a poem. Like, that's one of my favorite things to do, is go read a journal entry from a random day in my journal and then go say, okay, like how did I feel? Like, why did I feel like that? And like, maybe there's something that comes out of it or maybe not, but having that space regularly to explore has been a huge, huge thing. And the book came out of that. It was this like allowing myself to feel creative, whether it was outputting something or rereading another piece of creative, you know, piece from my past, or maybe reading something from somebody else. And I know we'll talk about this later, but that's kind of why I started the AI for the November, what is that? No, the novel.
NaNoWriMo.
Yes, there we go. I was like
Mhm.
trying to get it out. I was like, I don't remember how to say it. Because even though I was still actively working on a character for a novel that I will be writing in the next couple of years, I'm not ready to like really dive into that novel yet. And I was like, well, what can I do for that? And so I worked simultaneously between the character building and the and my poetry. But the AI was a way for me to like learn how to get to have that creative space every day, where I look at a piece that's something else kind of put together with my suggestions, and it comes out differently sometimes than what I imagine, or maybe it comes out the same, and then I get to write something about it. And or I just get to look at it and it's beautiful, and I can say I held space for myself in a creative way today, and then that's it.
Yeah, I think it's so important. And I think people always overlook that if you're not ready to actually sit down with a manuscript or sit down with a project or sit down with a story, that you hold space for it and that you honor that inspiration because more comes from it. And I always say about honoring inspiration, and I think it's just such a beautiful process. Like the more you honor inspiration, the more it comes. And I think people always think like, oh yeah, if I'm always creating content, like how will I come up with new ideas? If I'm always publishing books, how will I come up with new stories? And it's just like the complete opposite. Like the more you write, the more you have to write, the more you create, the more juice you have to create. And it's a really beautiful thing. But I'd love to hear about your AI art journey.
Yeah. So this was thanks to our friend JP, who I don't know, one of the Rintiki Twitter space times he had mentioned it. And I was like, all right, I keep seeing AI art. I'm gonna check it out. And I didn't want to get super crazy with it. Um, but I wanted to explore it. And it's fun when you get into it, you start to see like, how your suggestions or different words, with the AI like affect the way it comes out and all of that. So I started with some of the free ones. I have right now my favorite free one is Starry AI. I started out with Wonder and I didn't really like it that much. These are apps. And then I cannot remember the one, we can try to find it later, but the one that JP uses, but it's a little bit more advanced. And so when I started the AI, I just started to like plug in words and see what came out, and some of the weirdest stuff comes out. But um, when I'm trying to like convey a feeling, it's crazy. The more like sometimes the more detail you can put in it into the suggestion of the AI, the search, the more it's basically trying to get the AI to interpret what the heck you're trying to say. Or you could go at it from another standpoint. And sometimes I would do that where I'm like, I have no idea what I want to see. So I'm just going to randomize some words and see what comes up. Along with that, it's that you don't have to get super deep into it, but the more you know about art, the more it's gonna you'll be able to get the AI to produce what you're trying to see, or and that's like know your genres, whether the medium that you want to see the AI produce, your artists, know who you want. Like maybe you like Dolly and you want to see some ballerina dolly thing, like and you can try that, and it's really interesting. And I only did this, I did it to check it out, and then I realized it was during November and I was like, oh, I can totally use this random stuff that I'm trying to like learn to like use it towards my inspiration, and I can learn in the process. So I'd take one piece of the suggested artists on the bottom, and not only did I get to like explore different artists during that month because I didn't know a lot of them, but I got to see what they looked like with their paintings, and what the AI interpreted what my suggestion was with their style. And it was very interesting. I don't like use it to like publish or make money. I basically just use the AI art to further my own learning in the visual arts, but also to use it as an inspiration for whatever. I know you had done a week, right, with your AI and your poetry, and I really, really liked that. Like, it was a huge inspiration.
Yeah, I used Midjourney. A friend of mine, Lex, actually is a AI art like kind of creator, and he did like an art film festival and he won the festival. And yeah, he's an incredible teacher. and I learned so much in, I think it was about like 6 weeks, just like an intensive of Mid Journey. And yeah, it's just there's so much to learn, and I love it for poetry because you can kind of like tell a story, or people can kind of like look at it, and it can be animated, and it's just something that can really complement like the words. And I love to do my own audio. I actually tried out AI audio, and people just said it like wasn't the same as hearing a human's voice. And I work so much on getting my voice to sound a certain way, specifically when I read poetry. So it really took away from kind of like the heart of it. So yeah, I think there's some my art kind of stuff that doesn't kind of like make sense in terms of like creating, and then there's stuff that like really complements what you create as a creator. And I think kind of like finding that balance is just so important, and like harmonizing it. But yeah, I'd love to talk about, you mentioned Rintiki.
Hmm.
Yeah, so the suicide prevention, we work on that together. It's a suicide prevention group. And it started from a blog post that was just 11 reasons to not kill yourself. I think original one was 11 reasons to keep going. And then it turned into a YouTube video, and now it's going to be turned into an NFT collection. And we started with Twitter Spaces a couple months ago, maybe a few months ago.
Yeah.
And that's every Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we just have different topics every time. Um, yeah, and there's a Discord that we have activities and challenges. So this month was a gratitude challenge,
Hmm.
which was just so beautiful to see everyone kind of like find gratitude with themselves, and even if they're struggling, to find like what they're grateful for in that day. And I just thought that was so beautiful, seeing everyone kind of like grow and flourish. And the next month, January, we're going to have gratitude Wednesdays, and then on Mondays and Fridays we're going to have self-discovery questions, which is just a framework to I have this ebook, Love Your Life a Little Bit More, and it's just the framework that personally helped me, and I'd love to bring it to this community, so I'm really excited about that. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about it, MJ, about Renteki and just the work with that.
Yeah. So I actually, when you guys started to do Rentiki, I was starting to get out of my like happy period of time in the year. So it actually came at a very good time. In this month it's been, I mean, a lifesaver, quite literally. So it's been really great. What I love about it is that it's like a tether, like once a week, at least once a week I get to sit with a bunch of people that may or may not have the same viewpoints, but we all are there to support each other. you know the that's always very supportive. And I love that we can start on a subject and it will just kind of run from there sometimes. And
Yeah.
I really enjoy that. Actually, I think it's beautiful because um just you never know where it's going to go, and it's kind of nice to have that. It starts off with intent, and most of the time we keep it reined into a subject. But yeah, I it's it's a good space to have. It's nice to see people, even if they can't show up to the live, they'll listen to the replay. And it's always beautiful when so many times in my life, especially the last couple of years, I've realized that just showing up means a lot, and that I might not feel amazing. The last couple of weeks have been really rough, and that really, for me, just being able to show up to a space like that, or my support group writing space on Saturdays too, is just like all I have to do is be. Like, I don't have to be anybody. I can be vulnerable. I can be sad, or I can be ecstatic, and I can be happy. And either way, it's fine because I'm showing up. and there's always going to be somewhere and someone there that can hold that space, even if I don't want to talk about it, even if I don't want to share the details of why I feel that way. The space is a positive support, where it is needed. So
Yeah, and thanks so much for mentioning your writing space. So that's Saturdays 10:30 to 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that's on Google Meet. So yeah, I personally love that space to write and to kind of like just feel like there's like a community holding space. Just because I think sometimes sometimes it's a different energy when we create on our own, and it can feel kind of like a warm hug, even if it's just us on a silent call, just to know that like you're creating and someone else is also dedicated to creating within that hour, and that it's this sacred time and sacred space, and it has this beautiful feeling to it.
It's been really great. I actually ran into a couple of different silent holding space things recently, and I was like, oh, I should totally have one for writing, because I mean, for me, I have to show up every every Saturday at 10:30. That in itself is accountability, but to be able to do it with other people is huge. It does have that. It is like a warm hug. It definitely feels like you're in a room, a nice warm room with others who are doing the same thing, and you're not alone. It is
Yeah, and with that you also have a Facebook group, Well-Rounded Writing Support and Accountability Group. So we will link that in the show notes, and it's also on the page with all of your links, which will also be linked in the show notes. And the show notes are just, if you're listening to this on a podcasting site, it's just in the description, and if it's on YouTube, it's the description. And sometimes you have to do see more, so if you don't see the link specifically, just do see more and look for it. Yeah, and I think that's really wonderful. So who exactly are you aiming to hit with the Facebook group and the writing space?
basically anyone who's looking to write at all. Anywhere between, I want to journal more, and maybe even if you don't consider yourself a writer necessarily, you don't have to. Maybe you just want to. I have a friend who she writes poetry. She doesn't even really share it. She just likes to write, and that's okay too. You don't have to share what you have, but being able to do that, for me, my writing is very much for me and not for a lot of people. Like the amount of the amount of writing I actually do during the day that is for me versus output to the world it's got to be like an 80-20 split. It's got to be like 20 to the out to 80 to the in for me. And so even if that's your thing, if you want to write more for yourself, or if you're somebody who's just figuring out how to get your next novel out and you need some accountability, where you just in a space with people who can hold you accountable. Say you're having a rough day, or you ran into like, every time I sit down I just can't get anything on the paper. Like, let's work through it. Let's see, maybe there's other people who have had that similar experience but aren't outwardly talking about it. I knew a lawyer, or that was a previous lawyer, and then ended up like writing a book, but they're still a lawyer, and their book is, they just did it to do it, just to be able to say they wrote a book and to get that out of themselves. And she still writes. And I mean, that's the level of like, between those levels, you could be a novelist to somebody who wants to journal more, to self-discover. I'm a huge journal advocate, so please, if that's what you want to do, I am all for you coming in and all of that. So
Yeah, and along those lines, you're also offering 20-minute discovery calls for creativity coaching.
Yes, I truly believe that everyone has the capacity to be creative. I know a lot of people don't like, I know a ton of people who are consider themselves logic minded and not so creative. And I say that's not true. Everybody's got creativity in them. And I think if someone's at a space where they want to explore what that looks like for them, I am done, not to toot my own horn, but I really do like feel like I was put on this earth to hold space for other people, and I do that really well. So, you know, if you want to chat, please like hit up the 20-minute and we'll see what we could do. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but hopefully we leave the call with more than what we started with. So.
Yeah, and you have offering coming up for writing sessions.
Yeah, in June, I would like to, I want to get through this like at least the next 6 months or so. Personally, things need to even out for me before I take on more, but next year I was planning on the summertime doing a accountability, small accountability groups. So like a creative sprint, but like at the end there will be something that comes out of it, whether it's like a book or a short novel or something you want to put, you get published, whether it's in a newsletter or whatever. The accountability group will be output related, basically.
Yeah, I love that kind of like result oriented or like outcome oriented situation. Like I think so much can be done in such a little amount of time when you actually hold yourself accountable and you have momentum and other people are doing the same thing, because so much of momentum is contagious.
Mm.
And I think it's like people say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. It's so true. And so much of that is just that energy is contagious. And just like energy, momentum is that energy that is contagious. So intentionally being around people who motivate you, inspire you, uplift you is so important. And I'm just so honored to be in so many communities with you, where we actually have that as part of the mission. And I think it's just all the time people tell me about how the internet is just like a place full of hate and a lot of it's vain. And I think it really is like what you put into it, and that's what you get out of it. And I
Mm.
think like when you're consuming content all the time and you're not following people who make you feel bad, it can be a hard place to be. But like when you're a content creator and you are following people who inspire you, it's just a totally different place. And when you're using it to express yourself and to have a voice, it's just such a beautiful thing. And especially when you're cultivating communities and communities that you believe in and missions that kind of like move people forward. I think it's just something that's so powerful. And I'm just so honored to do it with you in so many different ways.
Yeah, I mean, you add so much value to my life on a regular basis. Truly, truly, like you just have so much like wisdom, and your energy is so caring. It's yeah, I'm very grateful for you.
Oh, that's how I feel about you as well. I always know if I need to speak to a soul sister, it's you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, actually, speaking of just that major influence you have on me, that's actually, you were one of the people I went to when I wanted to start a podcast, because I am such a fan of Mirrored Wellness, your podcast. And I remember it was like one of the first, this is probably so sad, but it was one of the first podcasts I ever listened to. Just
Nice.
because yeah, like I didn't really like know how to like find podcasts. And I wasn't really this what year did you start it? It must have been like 2020 or 2021.
Like 3
And
years ago, I think about 3 years ago. Yeah.
yeah,
Right before
yeah,
the pandemic.
yeah. So actually, it could have been 2019. I feel like it was winter, so it was probably 2019. Um, and yeah, it's just like so incredible. You talk about a lot of like self-development, spirituality, and that's stuff that I'm like really interested in. And I remember you had the Sarah Habab episode. I remember listening to that and just you mentioned me and I was like, oh my God, like I felt like so honored to like it's like I'm in a podcast. Which is like it just seems so major at the time.
I love it.
Uh I remember I was listening to it and I was like, I can't believe it. And I like wanted to pause and like go back. But yeah, I actually, when I wanted to start a podcast, because I knew a few other people with podcasts or kind of like expertise in podcasting or sound design and things like that. So I invited everyone to a secret party.
Oh yeah,
And
I remember that.
yeah, I didn't tell
What is
anyone what
Katie
it
up
was
to?
about. Yeah, it was from I think Les Brown. He says something about like if you're like really struggling in writing, like invite all the good writers over and don't tell them why, and just say it's a party and then be like, actually, I'm here to to learn how to write. And that's actually what I did. I invited all of you guys to like a secret party. I can't believe you guys actually came. That's just it's
Everybody
surprising.
came.
Yeah. I'm glad you did. Everyone I invited showed up, and everyone was excited to see people they recognized. And then that's when I said is about I want to start a podcast. I'm going to ask you every question I have. And you know what really surprised me at that was how much I realized me not having a podcast was about my own self-doubt, and that it didn't matter how much or specifically Tony Angelini, the sound design guy, told me about the technical side of it. Like what I really needed to hear was that I could do it and that people believed in me.
Yeah. I mean, when I started my podcast, I remember my friend just going, just do it. Here's the site. Just do like a 5 minute. Like no one cares how long it's going to be. Just do it. And because I was on her podcast, her name is Jamie Grogan, and she's restarting her podcast again. And I just loved the experience. It was great. And I was like, God, I would love to, like, I feel like I have so much to say. And she's like, just start a podcast. And I was like, I'm not that person. Like, I don't, but again, it was a lot of like that preconceived notion. It's still weird for me to say, like, every once in a while, I'll mention something or somebody will be like, MJ said podcast, she's got a podcast. And people are like, yeah. And I'm like, now being on the other side of it, I'm like, it's not a big deal, but like, it's still weird to hear people be like, you have a podcast? Or like, even now, like when people are like, oh, you've published a book. I remember being on the other side of that and looking at somebody who had those things and who had done those things. And I was like, show me your ways. Like, I don't know how to do this. And at some point you just kind of have to, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do it. And one of the things I really liked that is kind of unique is to the podcast is that it really started off as this, I'm journaling, or I'm verbally getting out everything I need to say about this thing that I just learned, and it really helped me. And I feel like I need to share it. And it was just me talking to my computer, to myself in a very quiet room. And that was it. And it became a podcast because, and then eventually I took on, interviewing people who I really inspired or who inspired me. And it was a great experience. It was like journaling out loud. It was great. And I tried to keep that even with the interview process. I would try to keep them as conversations. I have like strict rules about my podcast. Like I don't edit my stuff. Like when I go do a podcast, I don't edit it. Like, so if I, because we were talking about coughing, if I cough in the middle of a podcast, that's it. You're going to hear the cough. If it's 5 minutes long, it's 5 minutes long. Because I just despise editing so much. And maybe someday it'll be different, but I don't know, I just don't like editing, so that's like, I'm not doing that. So you're gonna always get like whatever authentic piece of me is that particular day. Bless Tony Angelini for at least once or twice helping me get some weird like static crap out of my podcast episodes. So he's done that for me a couple times. But yeah, it's just such a great experience. I really enjoyed it. I took a break from it this last year to try to recalibrate. I have a tendency to take on everything and say no, and not be able to say no. So I was like, I love my podcast, but it's got to be put down for a minute. So this coming year, I will be reintroducing podcast episode a month, and we'll start there. So
Yeah, actually, a little bit deeper into that. I'd love to hear kind of like your process for knowing if something is aligned and serving you. Because this is going to come out the first week in January. And I think it's really good for people, kind of like the fresh start of a new year, to kind of like see what is aligned with them, what's serving them in their life that they want to do more of, and what's taking away from the things that matter to them. And I'd love to hear your process on how you can decide that for yourself, and if you have any tips for other people who who are looking to do that in the new year.
yeah, so I'll walk you through actually my current one that I'm working on right now, because of the new year, and it's just a good time to do it anyway. So it took me a really long time to I have a I have a dream or a vision of a sanctuary for writers and creatives, and it's a homestead, and people can come and they can have this like solo space to themselves to just, self-discover and to heal and to write and to do what they want to do in peace. And I I've had this vision for a really long time, and it's just within the last like few years that I've really amped it up to where I've started to realize that it can be a reality. So now I've turned that dream into my purpose for being. Um, so because of all that work, and that, granted, this took me a good 18 years from the time I really started to have that dream until today. So, and maybe it doesn't take 18 years for somebody. Don't let that be a reason. But maybe you had a dream 18 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 5 years ago, and you really wanted it, but you put it down because you were like, it's just not a reality. If you really want something, you can make it a priority in your life. Like, that's the reality of the situation. And even if for me, I didn't have the credit, the know-how, the anything to figure out how to do this, but I started small. And I do have a tendency to be a people pleaser. I do have a tendency to say yes to everything because I want to be everything to everyone. This is part of my trauma or and whatnot. But I've started to really say, okay, this is where I'm gonna go. This is where I've what do I want to say? It's more like firmly decided that this is my purpose. This is where I'm gonna go. I want to be a writer. I want to create in a space of a homestead and be able to hold space for others in that sanctuary space. Everything else that didn't serve that had to go. Even if it was something that I really like to do, like the podcast, I had to say, I'm only focusing on 3 to 4 things this coming year. And those 3 to 4 things are going to serve this purpose. And that purpose was the sanctuary and the writing. And if it didn't serve that immediately, it had to go. It had to be a no. And so the podcast happened to be that for last year. It just wasn't, it didn't fit in the plan, really. The plan to do, the writing and stuff. And So I focused on anything that was going to serve that purpose, really. Um, and I'm continuing to do that for this next year, where I know where I'm going. And unfortunately, if it doesn't fit into that space of either helping others in the creative world, or um, helping my writing, like, continuing with the research and the becoming, the writer I want to be, and the sanctuary, if it doesn't serve those three things, it's gotta go. That's not to say, like, I have responsibilities, like being a mom and paying the bills, like all of that still needs to be accounted for. And that stuff you can't, not that you can't say no to, but those are things that you are responsible for because previously you've made those things a priority at some point. So if you don't want to make them a priority going forward, that's fine, but it still needs to be taken care of until you can put it down, kind of thing. So those are, residual things that, will eventually, and some things you just can't say no to. Like, I can't say no to being a mom. Like, that's not in the cards.
Mhm.
But I can parent in such a way that will allow me to learn skills as a person that I can put towards being a leader. Like, so, you kind of try to take the things that you have and morph them into what you need, I guess. So,
Yeah, I love how you talk about putting off creative priorities. And I actually call it like this effect, the splintering priorities, and kind of like this idea that there's like your main life, and sometimes it consists of what matters to you, but also what you think is practical. And then you have these dreams that kind of splinter off, that you say, I'll do it when I retire. I'll do it when my kids turn 18. I'll do it when my kids move out. I'll do it when I get married. I'll do it when I find a partner. I'll do it when I finally find the confidence. And just this idea that sometimes the problem with that is that we are so connected to our dreams that when we splinter some off and we wait to on some dreams, we take for granted what we have in the now.
right. And that's like, I 18 years ago, just, oh, it's a dream, like it'll, maybe eventually we'll do it. And then as I started to grow older, I realized that, like, oh, I am actually getting older, and maybe maybe I can make that dream like a reality, so it just doesn't, I don't, disappear from this earth, and it never happens. And eventually that morphed into, wow, actually I think this could be an actual reality, like I could create this thing in my life. And then from there, from that reality, it was, all right, I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to make it happen. And it's going to happen in between those spaces where I need to be, you know, this person right now. I need to be the mom, the housewife, the whatever I happen to be at the time. But I can still work towards that while I'm living that chug normal life kind of thing. um it's just a focus issue, really, if you think about it.
Yeah, I love that message. Don't wait to take action on your dreams. And you didn't mention this now, but I know from a personal journey, you did have like the retreat, the sanctuary as like a kind of like, I'll wait for this. And what you started to do is you started thinking like what can I do today with what's possible? And you slowly started like learning about it, looking into it. And the reason I love that so much is that that's what showed you that it was possible. And
Right.
that if you had waited all that time, you would have had to start from zero and you'd have less time to do it. And I think so many people just give up on their dreams altogether because they feel like it's too late or they waited too long. So if there's any one message, and I'm definitely gonna I'm gonna make a post about this, just because it's so inspiring to me. I just don't wait to take action on your dreams.
No. And look, you don't, a lot of times, because I'm an all, I tend to be all or nothing. Like, that's my go-to thing. Like, if I can't have all of it now, then I'm not gonna have any of it at all. And uh with a dream, especially a big one, like if you're a big dreamer and you hone in on a particular dream or goal of yours and it's big, like a lot of us can, or at least I know I have previously looked at it and was like, oh my gosh, that's way too big, there's no way I'm going to make that happen. But the reality of it is that it doesn't happen overnight anyway. So there are things you could do to small, and I'm kind of a research junkie anyway, so I enjoy the research part of projects. um and so I'm like, look, I could start to do research. Or blessed coach of mine was like, you don't have to have a sanctuary or a retreat center to do a retreat. Like, book an Airbnb, invite a bunch of people, do a retreat, like try it out, see what happens, maybe you don't like it. So, and those are things like you can think outside the box. Like, you have an extra weekend, like maybe you can make an extra weekend somewhere, and like say you do want to have like, you know, a retreat center, you can have a retreat somewhere and see how the flow works. Like, invite friends, like maybe people who are closer, so you can run through a more casual experience of it, you know. So, you know, there are small things. Or have a virtual mini retreat on a Friday night or something like that. And, you know, you can start so small, and it does build up over time, especially, and I say to people who might have like, I have like monkey mind, so I will totally forget. Like, this is why I journal, because at least, at the very least, I will have written down in my journal that, hey, like today I did this towards the sanctuary, or I did this and this has something to do with the sanctuary and the retreat center. And that over time you can kind of look back at those things and go, I have really been working on it. Because sometimes you don't realize, especially if you're chunking it into small chunks, you don't realize till it hits you in the face that like, oh crap, like, wow, I've come a long way. So yeah, you can start small.
Yeah, I love that so much. And in I do this program, Find Your Creative Vision, and part of it is talking about dream goals, and just this idea that taking action on your dreams doesn't have to be something that's like unrealistic or something that's impractical. Like, you can kind of like plan something that's realistic within your week, like no matter where you are in the journey, that has like that same dream frequency. Like, whether if it's like you want to like work at a certain place, like to attend, like work at the UN, attend an event at the UN, and like that's like a dream goal. Like, you can just literally like go to an event. And I think it's like so important that people recognize that even the small actions that we take on our dreams, it's really propels us forward. And it's really that kind of like that feeling that you have so much self-doubt around something, and that you're afraid to then kind of like dip your toe in the water. And I think like the more you kind of like give yourself those incremental steps to what seems so big to you, it you really realize that like how you realized with the sanctuary, it's possible. And I think like it sounds so simple, and it's like, of course, like dreams are possible, but people will talk themselves out of it in every single way, like in every single way. And I hear so many excuses, and I always say excuses show your priorities, because so much of the time we think our like big dreams that we like splinter as like a priority we're going to wait for, we always think that is something that's going to distract us from like our practical priorities. And it's just so not true. Like, really, there's like a middle ground where you can like marry the two, and you can take small actions on your dreams and even big actions, and like you can move forward, and also like at the same time appreciate what you have, the priorities that might not be something that feels like a dream, but something that is just so wonderful and incredible when you open your eyes to it.
Yeah, absolutely. All of that. It's just, I know from previous that I just would wake up and I'd be like, oh, I know it's possible. And there's a difference between logically knowing something, and I have this argument with I have this argument with one friend in particular a lot, that there is a difference between knowing something and then experiencing it. Whether that's like I know that coffee's hot. And then I go to sip the coffee after I poured it in there and I'm like, crap, it's hot. Like I just experienced that. Now I know what that feels like physically in my body. I know the emotion that comes with the shock. Like there is a significant difference from running through it in your brain and then actually experiencing it. And a, like a weird example of what happened to me this last year, why I really am like hightailing it towards the sanctuary now, is that my friend, she started, a little food truck and little organic food truck, and I worked with her a couple times, and she was telling me, look, one day after I had left, or some other day during the week, that this woman came up to her and was like, hey, are you interested in doing the organic food? Like, you want to grow it yourself? Like, I would love to invest in that. And she spoke with her, and it didn't end up panning out, or she ended up doing it. But the reality of it was that this woman started a food truck, and she would have loved to do like a whole organic farm and have that life, but she didn't think it was possible, or even if she thought it was possible, it wasn't a reality at the moment. But someone stepped in and was like, hey, I have the funds and I want this in our lives, like as a whole. Like, I'd love to see this in the state. So here, I will give you this and we'll sign an agreement, and then you can be that thing. And that whole experience, even though it didn't pan out, made me go, what the heck have I been waiting for? Because it really is possible. Do I really need the sanctuary to be under my name? Or can I have investors? Does it need to be 100 acres? Can I start with 10? Like, it made me go back and go, was I making it impossible because I didn't think I was ready for it? And so this last year, that one incident really made me think to myself, like, I was holding my own self back because I didn't realize how possible it actually was until someone showed me it was absolutely possible to be done. And again, I think that's the difference between knowing something and then feeling it, because while that was going on, I felt what that was like to go through because I was part of that process with her. She really wanted me to be a part of it. And so I felt what it was like to start the negotiations, to look at the properties, to go and do that stuff. And that allowed me to go, even though it didn't work out, and that was okay because it just wasn't right, it still allowed me to feel that thing. So maybe you want to open a restaurant, maybe just like go look at restaurants that have been shut down, or like ask a restaurant owner if you can tour the restaurant, like those small things that allow you to feel what you're actually trying to accomplish that's like, it's I mean, huge.
Yeah, and I also when I talk about that with people, I say like the most important part of like actually feeling your dream as a goal is that when you are in it and you get to see what it feels like, you can evaluate if that is what you actually want for your reality.
Right. Yeah, because if I had not experienced all that, and I, say it happened and then I got into, partnering with this person, and I could be like, oh crap, actually this is not what I thought it was going to be. It's not as enjoyable. What parts of it do I not want to be part of? You know, and and that the smaller aspect of running through all this stuff allowed me to be like, actually, I don't want to manage the property. I'm going to get somebody else to manage. So then I started to like readjust some of the pieces of it, and then it falls more into place for what I need the dream to look like for myself.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's just so important and so often overlooked. But just to wrap up the hour, I'd love to hear 3 reasons someone should join a creative sprint.
Oh gosh, okay. 3 reasons someone should join a creative sprint. One, the people are amazing. So I'm just going to go ahead and say community, because finding your people, there is absolutely nothing like getting into a group of people that you're like, I've found my people. So definitely try it all out. Like, even if this doesn't happen to be your thing, try something else. Like, get out there, find your people. It's important. Number 2, you will find pieces of yourself. And I found this every time I've done a creative sprint, that I found a piece of my creativity that I didn't know existed, or was dormant for a really long time. And to be able to explore that, this could be like partially number 3 as well. Being able to explore that in a safe space with other people is really, there's a sense of safety that comes with it that I would not have if I did it by myself. So those are 3 reasons.
Well, thank you so much. You can join in the show notes, and it will be in, I know it's definitely in my link tree, my links.
Fine, so
Awesome. So check out the link in our social media bios or the show notes. And yes, thank you so much, MJ.
thank you for having me. It was awesome. Always love it.
Oh yeah, and also your Mirrored Wellness has a merch store, so check out the merch store. That is also in the link in MJ's bio.
Yes. Check out Katie's merch. It's beautiful.
Thanks.